It is that time, ladies and gentlemen, and by that I mean fantasy football playoffs are around the corner. Brad, can you smell it? Can you smell those playoffs right around the corner?
So I'm in 6 leagues, and I'm smelling the playoffs in 5 of them. So, yeah, I smell it, and it
I didn't
smells
say,
good.
can you smell bragging about your playoff position? It was whether or not you can smell playoffs because, for a lot of people who aren't you, what we have is a situation where it could be do or die this week. And of course, we've got a call, but the calls aren't working. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to not accept this call. Unfortunately, our calls aren't working today. So, I'm going to actually take that off of there. And we'll just do comments today.
Yeah,
If
put your
you have any
comments in.
comments, because it's week 14, right? Week 14, guys, if you want to know who to pick up, who to drop, who you're looking to start, who you're looking to stream, go ahead and place your comment, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and we will get right to it. Tonight, though, on the show, we're going to go over some of the waivers. There's not a lot out there, Brad, but we do have some buys. We do have some injuries. So we're going to give you some suggestions. And, of course, throughout the show, we are going to take your calls. Oh, well, we can't take your calls. We're going to take your comments and your questions, and we are going to answer them for you. So, Brad, you're in the playoffs, you said, in 5 of 6 right now. Who would you say is the common factor in all of these teams, other than you being the owner?
In a few of the teams, I will say that it's Jonathan Taylor and it's Joe Mixon. And Matthew Stafford.
Right.
So yeah, those are really the 3 main. And another one is the Buffalo defense.
But is Stafford really a game like a team break? Like he's not in the same. And I'm not putting Stafford down. He's steady, but he's not Joe Mixon. He's not Jonathan Taylor. In other words, when we see the championship team of everybody's league at the end of the year, they're going to have some people, some common factors, whether it is Jonathan Taylor, whether it is Mixon. I'm just saying Stafford might be a top 5, but he's not the guy who's going to make or break. Like in the past, we saw what Josh Allen did for people last year. Yeah. We saw what Patrick Mahomes has done for people in the past, not this year.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not putting down Stafford. I think if you have Mixon or you have Taylor and you have Stafford, yeah, you're probably going to the playoffs. I don't think there's a doubt about it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is some of those guys are common on my rosters, and all my rosters are different. Another one is Chris Godwin is consistent on a few of my rosters. So it is interesting how some of your people, when you're drafting, I guess you have certain people in your head, and those are guys you have some crossover on teams. I will say that this week, going into what is probably a lot of people's last week, it is a brutal bye week, right? Yeah. If you
a lot of people who needed Taylor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you probably scored 200 points the past few weeks, and now you're going into this final week. If you had Taylor, most likely you don't need to win this week in order to go to the playoffs, but you never know. Right? If you don't have a supporting group along with it, you may not have enough. I would love to hear from our fans out there. Who's the common factor on who is the guy on your team that is propelling you to the playoffs? Or on the other side of that, Brad, who's the guy that you drafted or that you picked up that you thought, oh, I'm playoff bound for sure, but now I'm screwed because he didn't perform? Or in my case, he's hurt. Whether it's Dalvin Cook or Deebo Samuel, who is it? Who's on your team that's doing that?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Going into the playoffs right now, I'm locked in for the most part in a bunch of my leagues, which I'm very fortunate. I don't know, it kind of one league I started 0-5, now I'm 7-6, and I have the playoff spot. Although we have 1 more week. 2 more weeks, I think, because it's an 8-person team. I didn't set it up. I just play in it. But you're right now, you're looking not only for this week. If you're locked in, you got to be looking to pick up people for the weeks after that. Who do you handcuff? Who do you maybe like in my instance, well, maybe I shouldn't talk about it, but Joe Mixon is a little nicked up right now, right? So do I look to handcuff him right now? I mean, I have pretty deep running backs, but they're all hurt right now. One's on, two of my guys are on IR. I haven't been able to take Kamara off IR yet. So there's a lot of different things and to be looking at besides if you do get in the playoffs, what can you do for that as well?
Well, look, since you brought it up, Brad, we were talking about, who are some of these guys that are out there on the waiver wire who might be worth grabbing, whether it's because you need a streamer because you have somebody on bye, or you need to make sure you have that handcuff.
Right.
And you just talked about Mixon. Who would be the first on your list? Not necessarily the most important or the one who's going to be picked up the most, but who is somebody that you're like, we're grabbing this guy this week? Who is?
So I'm going to go with KJ Osborne. Okay, I'm assuming, and a lot of people have him this week. He's going to be a hot pickup this week because Thielen is hurt. This guy started off hot, early in the season, the first 5 or 6 games, and then kind of disappeared over the last 5 or 6 games. And now with Thielen being hurt, he kind of reemerged, and they're in a position where they got to win some games because they're falling fast. They're putting up points. So for fantasy value, their fantasy players are good, but they need to win games. So they have to be scoring. So, for him to kind of fill in that Thielen spot, I think he is my number one pickup this week.
Yeah, and look, we might as well stay with that offense for a moment because you've got Conklin, and you've got people who have Gesicki, who's on bye this week.
Yep.
People might just be carrying one tight end, right? A lot of people aren't going to have 2 tight ends on their bench, or maybe you had Logan Thomas. You were excited about the fact that he was coming back, and now you find out he's not, or he's back and
now he's out, right?
And now he's out. So, if you need that tight end and Conklin's available because of Thielen, it's changing the whole dynamic of everything. So you've got Conklin, you got Madison, although he's got to be taken in all the leagues at this point. You've got Osborne.
I would hope so.
Yeah, and you've got Osborne. I mean, these are all good choices. And even playing Cousins, would you play Cousins as a QB1 this coming week? And that's a question. Without Thielen, is that really going to change? I don't know if people have been starting Cousins, but is he startable this week against Pittsburgh?
I think absolutely. I think absolutely he's startable. The question here. So I have a question. I kind of have my playoff spot locked up. That's okay. That's fine. But I have Stafford, and I've had you just Cousins. God, I want to play.
Oh, okay.
I've had Cousins on my bench all year, and I used him 1 week. He did okay. He filled in, but I've kept him there as my backup quarterback. But do I start him in? Stafford goes against the Cardinals this week. So I got to stick with him. So I don't put him in there. But as a fill-in, if you have someone on bye that's been doing well, I think he's definitely a good plug and play. I think there's other quarterbacks actually that have potential as well this week.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about, I know we're kind of going out of order and we're going all over the place, but let's talk about quarterbacks. What about, because this also goes to waivers, what about Taysom Hill against the Jets? It looked like the way that he was throwing the ball the other night, it wasn't that impressive, but at the same time, he did score a lot of fantasy points. And he is going against the Jets this week.
This was his same situation last year. He's not putting up 350 yards a game. Right. He's going to put up 210 yards a game, but he's going to give you 50, 60, 70 rushing and probably a rushing touchdown. So that adds up, right? And it ends up being good fantasy value.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then let's shift gears a little bit. Unless you want to stay on quarterback,
Well, that's fine. I have a quarterback to throw out there.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, first talking about quarterback. What if you actually had Mac Jones last night and you needed like 6 points? You're like, all right, I'm good, no problem.
How desperate do you have to be to feel like you have to start Mac Jones? Now, look, I know
that's a whole other issue. I know.
Right. I know you're just joking here because, there's like probably 31 quarterbacks I would have started above Mac Jones yesterday. But yeah, no, I get it. And it was embarrassing.
I mean, this is an anomaly. Obviously, the wins were really bad. I know that you had made a post today about the system and he's, the quarterback and everything. But keep in mind, he still has to hand that ball off. You got to turn and you got to give that ball to the running back.
Man, he knows how to turn and hand off that ball. He is special, that boy. In the meantime, Tua can't even catch a break.
Right.
One of the most accurate passers in the NFL this year, and he can't catch a break. But Mac Jones is sitting there handing off the ball, and he's now the Wunderkind. Okay, enough of that. You're just making me mad.
So here's my quarterback potential for this week is actually right on the other side of Cousins this week. It is Ben Roethlisberger. Okay, he's going against an awful Minnesota defense, especially defensive backfield. And all of a sudden, in the second half of the game last week, he's like, oh, I remember how to throw the ball, and I got this guy Deontay Johnson out there. I'll just throw it to him. So I think Roethlisberger is in line for a potential really good game this week. So if you need to stream a quarterback, if you've been using Wentz or whatever the case may be, and they're on bye, or you need somebody, that might be a good matchup for you.
Personally, I can't sign off on that recommendation, but that's just me. I figure, look, if everybody has two quarterbacks, then maybe I bring in Roethlisberger. I have Roethlisberger right below Garoppolo and Tannehill. Like I don't have them in that top 15.
I understand.
But yeah, I understand what you're saying as well. But let's shift gears for a second. Let's talk about the running back. You had mentioned earlier about, look, at this point, you might want to start thinking about handcuffing some of your superstars. Now, I've been doing that out of a necessity all year. I drafted Madison. I picked up Hyde because I've got James Robinson, who, of course, gets benched for fumbling at the beginning of the game. Comes back in the second half, but by that point, it was too late.
Did you see today that he had an interview and basically said, yeah, I was benched?
Everybody knew he was benched. Everybody, you're not going to say that Carlos Hyde is a better runner than Robinson. But yes, I saw that. But the point is that Hyde, and I want to talk about this, but we'll get to this later. I'm actually going to write this down. But if you're looking for a handcuff, especially, and God, I'm going to sound like 2020, but especially given the current state of Eli Mitchell with concussion and not knowing what's going to happen, you've got to think about Hasty, right? He's the only healthy running back in that backfield.
Yeah.
If you have Eli Mitchell, even if you don't have Eli Mitchell and you have an extra spot, throw somebody on IR, get rid of somebody you're not going to use. Look, you've only got a few games left.
Yeah.
Get rid of somebody that's just sitting there and then grab somebody like Hasty.
If he doesn't clear concussion protocol, then Hasty looks like he'll be the guy this week. Right?
Yeah.
And as great as Eli Mitchell is, you throw any running back into that backfield and they're going to do the same thing.
So what you're saying is that Eli Mitchell is the Mac Jones of San Francisco.
I am saying Eli Mitchell is a top 30 running back in this league.
No, I get it. I understand what you're saying, and I was just joking too. But yes, it is a system thing, and I don't care if it's Jeff Wilson. I don't care if it's Hasty. I don't care. And look, you could put Kalen Ballage back there, and he would do something. He might run backwards, but he'll still do something. So if you have the ability to get Hasty, that's not a bad choice. Somebody else that I wanted to bring up that I'm bringing up these people that I wouldn't have brought up in the past. And here's another one, and that's Jameson Crowder. We know that Davis is now out for the year. So they've got the two wide receivers in New York, right? They've got Moore and they've got Crowder. Crowder is available in most leagues, and there's a reason for it. But at this point, first of all, if Moore is available, you should grab him before thinking about Crowder. But if you really need to stream I've streamed somebody. I think Crowder is kind of a sneaky pick against New Orleans this week.
I am not signing off on that.
That's fine. I mean, I don't see him doing any worse than Kenny Galladay or Tim Patrick. These are people that when you start looking down at the bottom of your roster, that you've grabbed people over. Even someone like Cortland Sutton, who had all the promise in the world,
he disappeared.
He disappeared. So, are you going to start somebody like Cortland Sutton, who may or may not? And I know they're playing Detroit, but they may or may not have a good game. Or are you going to grab somebody like Crowder, who, look, for the most part, he's been pretty consistent. He's going to get you every week. Not every week, but he's going to get you 10 points.
Yeah, but do you want to go after someone like him, or do you want to go after Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Okay.
I
understand this is the floor ceiling debate.
Right.
Okay, I get it. And Crowder has probably the highest floor out of everyone, but probably an average ceiling, right? He's not going to get him. He might, but he's not going to get.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that.
There's
that anomaly game where he's going to get 32 points and go crazy, but that's falling off quickly with the emergence of.
But I wouldn't put him in the same level as St. Brown. I think St. Brown is actually. I would. If you want to make a mediocre bet about Crowder versus St. Brown, I think Crowder might actually have a better game. But if you were talking about somebody like Christian Kirk or Landry or Gallup, then I will agree with you, because these are guys that might be available that are on that lower end, the wide receiver 3 position, even an MVS, right? Who had that good game, then they went on bye, and now he's back. So, there's definitely people out there.
We can do it. Oh, my dollar was here. Every time I need the dollar, I can't find it.
I got the dollar. I'm going to write it down. I'm taking a jet, and don't tell anybody, but I'm taking the jet.
As you're writing that down, we did have Kenneth did ask a question here. Which players should we be watching out for in the playoffs? Okay, we'll get to that. Excellent, Kenneth. Thanks. Travis said he won again this week.
Oh, that's our Vampire League.
That's the Vampire League, yeah. So, Travis, let us know. Do you still get to pull off of that team? So, what does your team look like now?
What are the playoffs? What does your team look like? And then what do the playoffs look like?
And who is that with you in the picture? And then Travis asked also who the top 5.
Don't be hitting on our listeners.
I was just wondering, maybe it's his sister. I don't know. Top 5 defenses for the week.
Top 5 defenses for waivers or just in general?
It sounds like in general, it's hard to tell.
If it's in general, you just got to look at who are the top 5 or the worst 5 offenses and play like the Saints are playing against the Giants. I mean the Jets. The Packers against Chicago, Broncos against Detroit,
Seattle against Houston.
Chargers against the Giants, Titans against Jacksonville. These are the guys at this point that you're starting.
Correct.
Chargers I have they haven't been great this year, but the Giants with a concussed quarterback, I mean, they might end up having to start Jake from State Farm. As serious, Jake Fromm might end up being their starting quarterback.
Yep, I did. So, he did show up on pickup list for the week. Yeah, for sure. One of my pickups here is anybody playing against Houston has any waiver pickup.
I mean, even if like a team like the Seahawks, I'm not saying that they're in my top 5 because the Seahawks defense has just been terrible. But they're playing against them. Look, it looks like Mills is going to be their quarterback for Houston. this week.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he has I understand that. I'm not saying start Mills. I'm not that guy, but I'm saying that he has in the past been able to put up numbers. When week 5 he threw for 300 yards, week 6 243, week 8 310 yards. Now, yes, sprinkle in a few 100 to 200 yard games in there, but the point is that he still has the ability, and if he's playing against a bad defense like Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
you just never know. I'm not saying don't start them. I'm just saying that's why they're not in my top 5 at this point.
Fair enough. All right, so we have a question from Daniel here. Daniel was with us last week as well. Oh, wait. Sorry, I put the wrong one up. Would you boys sit DK after his total last few weeks, meaning DK Metcalf, I assume?
Right.
Thinking of, I guess, putting in Van Jefferson instead. That's a really interesting question. And wow.
I can't do that. First of all, they're playing against Houston. So I
That's right.
And you might think, okay, that just means they're going to run, but with who? So, quite frankly, I'm not sitting. Now is not the time to get cute. And I understand that DK Metcalf has underperformed significantly, especially recently.
Yeah.
But I don't have him as a top 10, but I have much higher than Van Jefferson. Not that Jefferson doesn't have the ability to do it, but Jefferson is not the first choice on that team. And you might say, well, Lockett is the first choice on Seattle. I'm still saying DK Metcalf is you cannot sit him this week.
You know, Metcalf has 4 straight games without getting 10 points.
Yeah. I understand that.
That's tough. No, and I this week of all weeks, that's just a tough question, because if it was against a defense like the Rams or somebody else, maybe that's a different answer. Because Van Jefferson is getting the targets, he's getting touchdowns, he's like the number 2 receiver there, right? So that's you really got to think about it. They play Arizona next Monday night, I believe, if I'm correct, right? The Rams.
Yep.
So, they're going to have to be throwing the ball.
It's funny, when you look up Van Jefferson, you see, he hasn't had a single 100-yard game this year. DK's only had 1.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
right.
insane. Nobody would have been drafting him in the second or third round if they knew that was going to be the case. I mean, it's insane. That offense, someone had put a few weeks ago that Russ was broken. That offense is broken.
Yeah.
And, it's just terrible.
Well, Russ kind of came. He's starting to look a little bit better. I mean, but everything went to Lockett.
Yeah.
Last week, right? But yeah, I mean, Metcalf up until week 8 was having a very good, productive season fantasy wise, and then just like the bye week came, and then done.
Yeah.
So he was doing better without Wilson in there for a bit.
Okay. Daniel also wants to know Eckler, Patterson, Madison, and Freeman. Wow. You have Eckler, Patterson, and Madison? That's pretty good. I mean, we don't even need to talk about Freeman.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
Eckler I have as my number 1 flex this week. Eckler is going to go off this week. Madison I actually have number 3. Patterson a little further down, but they don't need, none of them come close to where Freeman falls. So definitely Eckler, Patterson, and Madison. I assume you agree.
100%. All of those other 3 quarterbacks don't run the ball. Freeman is the second option on that team. So,
well, he's spelled by Levante, and I will say this though, Freeman has looked good this year considering his age and what's been going on with him. But yeah, so you're lucky, Daniel. Are you? I would assume you're doing well in your playoffs.
Yeah, he said he heard Eckler was hurting, which is true. I heard that as well. If he's going to play he's your guy. Obviously, keep an eye on that. If it's different, then throw Freeman in there if he's not going to play.
And Thursday night, none of those guys are playing on Thursday night, so you still have time on Sunday to see. Obviously, if Eckler is not going to play, you might even want to consider Roundtree. You might even want to consider somebody who's going to take that position, even over Freeman, possibly. But again, that's a discussion that's something to think about on Sunday. I don't see Eckler sitting out this game. They need him. Let's put it that way. You're 10-3. Those before. Wow, very nice.
So you should have a playoff locked up already, most likely in your league, I would assume. Wrong. Oh, Madison.
Oh, you're right. Minnesota plays Thursday night. I apologize. You're going to start Madison anyway. I was talking about Eckler. I'm talking about Eckler and Freeman because we were talking about whether or not Eckler was going to play, and if not, would you switch him out with Freeman? You don't have to worry about that for Thursday night, is what I meant. But you're playing Madison regardless of Eckler's status. Okay, so let me tell you what I was thinking about when we were talking about James Robinson and Carlos Hyde. And I'm talking about real-time fantasy. And I think there's a platform out there that actually started exploring this, and I should have done some research before bringing it up. But the idea that you would be able to switch players in the middle of a game, just like you can in the NFL. You bench somebody gets hurt, you go into your roster, you change it. It's almost like a best ball concept. You're playing your best players regardless of whether or not you're starting them, they're on your bench. At the end of the day, you take all of the stats from all of your players, and that's who you're playing. But I like the idea of being able to, everybody's got their phone. Everybody, for the most part, everybody's connected. I know there's people traveling and everything else, but for the most part, to be able to change during a game, I think that would be extremely cool.
So this is a very interesting idea. Is it out there? Did you look into it? Is it out there? I think it is.
I didn't look into it. There was something called Fantasy Life or something like that where they were exploring
doing something like
real
that.
Time, but I'm not sure if
I would assume so. But man, you talk about having to be in front of your TV. I mean, you can't even get up to go to the bathroom, right? Or you have to put your set up your TVs in your bathroom. Maybe, I don't know, but you can't move, right? Like, look at, for instance, last night. This happened. Okay, so I'll tell you the scenario and how does this work out. So I'm up by 22 points going into last night in my contest. The only player my opponent has is Damian Harris. Damian Harris, boom, breaks that one. I think it was late in the first quarter.
Yep.
The 60-something yarder.
Yep.
But all of a sudden, he gets 15 points. He only needs 22. And so I'm only up by 4 or 5. I think 5 at this point. Whatever, because he already had a few other carries. And I go, done, right? And then what do they do? Of course, Stevenson comes in on the next series. Harris is, in and out a little bit. Boom, he gets hurt. And I walked away for a little bit. I was doing something else. I came back and I see him walking into the locker room just before halftime, without the team. So I'm like, I wonder if something's wrong or whatever, because I hadn't seen that he got hurt.
Right.
So what happens in that scenario? Do you take him out? Then he comes back and plays in the third quarter on his very first run, which was like a 22-yard run or something like that. I'm like, oh, great. I'm done again, right? And now he's only down by 2 points, and then he gets hurt on that play. You see him pull up with his hamstring, and then he's done for the night. So what do you do in a scenario like that, in a system like that, like in and out, in and out?
I don't know. Look, I haven't written a prospectus on it yet. But I mean, my point being that if you had the ability to make those changes during the game, I just think it would be a little more interesting. I don't know what we're.
It's hard because if you have a draft, do you take, how do you draft? So if you might have one guy in one game, another guy in another game.
Similar to a handcuff.
Well, yeah, but what if you don't get that player and someone else has them, and do they put that player in at that point?
Yeah,
Take
they
someone
can.
out?
They absolutely can. They absolutely can.
Interesting.
I don't know. So Daniel asked, what is the best trade this year? I actually only made one trade, and
And it was
at
the
the
best for
time,
you.
everyone accused me of collusion or taking advantage. And it turns out it hurt me. It
Did
isn't.
it? Who did you
Yeah.
trade away?
But the trade was I traded Miles
Mm-hmm.
Gaskin, and Ridley before Ridley went cuckoo.
Right.
I traded Ridley and
Inside
Gaskin
information.
for Stephon Diggs. And Gaskin has actually put up more points since I think it was week 7 than Stephon Diggs has.
Would you have been starting Gaskin this whole time?
I don't know. Everything would have changed, right? I was using
Right.
Gaskin in my flex.
Okay.
I ended up picking up Darrell Williams for several, for those weeks when CEH was out, and that helped.
Right.
I now have Jamal Williams, so that helps. But that was tough. Now Daniel said his best trade was actually Herbert and Mike Williams for Devonta Adams.
So you, I assume, got Herbert and Williams, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm curious.
I'm not sure.
I'm curious what side of that you were on. Devonta, you don't hear much about him because he wasn't last year. It was 30 points a week, right? It was nuts.
Yeah,
Now it's like 27 points, 14 points, 11 points, 7 points, 16. He hasn't been putting up the kind of Devonta Adams. What?
The last two, week 12, he had 16. The week 11, he had 28. This is on one scoring system, not necessarily ours, but
right.
11 and 7, 16, 10, 30. Right. It's very up and down.
Right.
So not as consistent as you always want from Devonta Adams. They get Chicago this week.
Right. And we know that Herbert was only good for those few weeks when Montgomery was hurt.
Right.
And Mike Williams, he had, the beginning of the year, everyone was like, he was crazy. His first 5 games, he was great. And then he disappeared. And then we went on the show and we were talking about don't play Mike Williams.
Right.
He's disappeared. And then he puts up 100 yards and a touchdown against Pittsburgh. And then everybody picks him up again. And then he gives you 6 points. And then last week he gave you 13.5. So I get it. I mean, it's pretty close, but
yeah, I mean, Williams is his last few weeks, 14, 6, 20, 5, 20, then, 5 points. So he's up and down as well. So it's like the same thing.
This is a great question from Angelo.
What I will say before, it is a good question. Before we move on, Daniel, he will show up in the last few weeks. I think he will be a playoff star for you.
Who?
Devonta Adams.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's where you're going to really, really make out in that trade. Yeah. Angelo, here we go. Can we finally take the must start tag off of Elliott? He's been killing me the last few weeks.
Yes. Is he, we talk about, Brad, we talk about this all the time, and sometimes we don't even talk about who to start in your lineup because there are some people that every week you're going to start them regardless, no matter what. And if that's what he means by the must start tag, then you're absolutely correct. You can't go in, usually that's reserved for like your top 5 running backs. You can't necessarily go in and say you've got to start Elliott. Now, I'm not saying bench Elliott because there are plenty of running backs below Ezekiel Elliott because Elliott still has that ceiling. There are plenty of running backs below Elliott that people are starting on a daily basis.
Right.
Look, I've got James Robinson. I would start probably Ezekiel Elliott over James Robinson because you don't know what's going to happen. Jacksonville gets behind, forget it. Robinson goes away. We know Pollard has been looking much better. He looked better than Elliott at the end of last year. And the Cowboys are finally realizing that, but I don't know, Brad. What do you think?
So my, it's hard now that, I was actually listening to some things about Elliott today. I was doing some research because I heard someone mention it. So I wanted to kind of look it up. right now, they've been, I think, kind of curbing his usage a bit. He hasn't looked good. Pollard has looked better. The eye test, right? They always talk about that. He's looked better on the field. Elliott's kind of their workhorse. Like he's going to get him the 4 or 5 yards, break one once in a while. Pollard still looks better.
Yeah.
On his cuts, on his breaks, on his speed. Obviously, we saw the other night, right? Elliott's going to also have a 10-day rest right now in between games. So he's going to have a little longer rest because they played Thursday, and then not until the next Sunday. So he's going to be a little bit more rested. It's a tough one. I mean, it's got to depend on who else you have on your roster. You look at I'm looking over it right now, right in front of me, the last 4 weeks between these guys, both of them, and it looks like about the numbers here. So Elliott is this is one scoring system, so it might be a little bit different than 20. So that's 30, 50. No, excuse me, 30, 44. So about 50 points. And Pollard has 13 and 23 and 23, 46 and 17. So 56, 63 points. He's got 13 more points in this system. Now, he did have that one long touchdown run, which, adds into that quite a bit, obviously. But he's got that speed for it, where Elliott just doesn't seem like he has it anymore. It's got to depend on who else you have on your roster. That's going to be it's a situational thing. But I can see where that guy, Elliott, it could be hurting you because he's just not putting up first-round draft pick type numbers at this point of the season.
Let me ask you a question. I've got another waiver that we were talking about. Who are some people we can stream this week? This is not somebody you can pick up this week because they're on bye this week. But the week after, they play the Jets, then New Orleans and Tennessee. And I'm talking about the Miami Dolphins and Devonta Parker.
Yeah.
If Parker stays healthy, Tua he loves Waddle, right? We know he loves Waddle, but he also loves a little Devonta. 5 targets, 5 catches this past week for 62 yards.
Yeah.
If Parker's available and you need somebody, there's another sneaky play because he has a bye this week. So he's not really on a lot of people's minds.
Well, so you could pick him up this week.
Yeah, you could pick him up this week.
You definitely want to get him this week before people are thinking about him for the next week, the playoffs and whatnot.
Right, when they play the Jets. So
exactly.
And he's a Jet killer. He's always played well against the Jets. So, if you have room on your roster, you might want to think about picking up Devonta Parker. And I thought long and hard about whether or not I was going to talk about that because I don't want to make it sound like I'm a homer because I am. But being a homer allows me the opportunity to really see a player,
what's going on, right?
Know more about a player than you typically would. And I think Devonta Parker is just going as long as he stays healthy,
right?
That's
for
big,
more than a game and a half.
But yeah, that's the story on that.
So as we're talking about, we'll get to you in just a second, Daniel. Possible deep streamers, right? There's a guy this week, and it's a tight end, right? And tight ends, you might have some on bye, whatever the case may be. But how about Jared Cook? He's available in a lot of leagues. Now, he's generally getting 3-4 catches a game. He's not doing a whole lot, but depending on what happens with Keenan Allen this week, if he stays on the COVID list, it could be an uptick in, targets for him. So he could be a little bit of a sneaky play this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get you 4 or 5 targets, whether or not, might even go up, like you said, without Keenan Allen.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if Conklin is not out there and you're looking for a tight end, yeah, you could probably do worse than Jared Cook. I mean, but I wouldn't play him in the flex. I wouldn't play him unless you really have somebody who's struggling and you.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I've got him pretty low.
Kelsey.
But...
No, I'm just kidding.
Like Kittle.
He had 5 points last week.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really all the waivers I have for this week. And again, there's not a lot out there.
Daniel asks here, Parker/DJ.
Well, not for this week because Parker's on bye.
Maybe
So
he's asking about a waiver pickup. Deshaun Jackson, I assume you're talking about.
Oh, I don't know if he's talking about. I mean, obviously, if it's Deshaun Jackson, I would take Parker, but could be DJ Moore playing against Atlanta. DJ Moore is actually a good pick. I mean, I would start him. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2, maybe a lower end wide receiver 2 this week. But I still, I have him as a wide receiver 2 this week. For next week, we haven't even finished this week yet. You know what? He's playing against Parker is playing against the Jets in 2 weeks. I don't know who.
Oh, Metcalf. I think he's meant to put DK, not DJ.
Oh, in 2 weeks. That's a tough one.
Let's get through this week.
Yeah, I think we have to see. I think we have to see what's happening with that. DK Metcalf in 2 weeks plays against the Rams. So it's going to be interesting because it might end up being a shootout. So on turf, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think at that point maybe you go with Parker.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see. I just had something on my mind and got thrown off. Now it's out of my mind.
It's okay. It's okay. So we have, just to rehash one of the bets we had, and I think we said that it was going to be we said it was going to be for the season possibly, but we were talking about Jalen Hurts versus Lamar Jackson. And I was still running with the flag for Lamar Jackson, but at the time you didn't know that Hurts was actually getting hurt, and they ended up playing the stash as quarterback, and he did great.
Yeah, he did
for Philly. So that's still out there. So I'm not going to hold the dollar up yet, but I think it's going to be mine.
There's starting to be a little bit more space in between the Stafford and Jackson.
Yes, Jackson's doing the opposite of what he did last year. When he came on at the end of the season, Jackson is actually heading down this season. Once the Dolphins broke him and exposed everybody to how you stop Lamar Jackson, it's a copycat league, right? That's what they say.
Hey, figure it out.
Should we temper expectations for Alvin Kamara's return against the Jets with Taysom Hill at the wheel? Brad, he's your boy.
This is my guy. I have direct contact with nobody about Alvin Kamara, but I would like to. If anybody knows his number, let me know. No, they didn't bring him back last week. Obviously, the Saints are going the wrong way. They're looking for something. So if they can get him back on the field, I'm sure they're going to. If he's had now 3 weeks he hasn't played. It could be 4 weeks. I'm not even sure. But with Hill on the field, Kamara will still get his opportunities. Yeah. He's going to lose a little bit.
No. Remember we talked about this, right? We talked about how he looked. Everyone thought how Kamara would be when Breeze went out last year. And it turned out that he actually did better with Hill than he did with Breeze. To me, there's only one question. Is he going to play? If he plays, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to sit him for a week while he's playing because I'm worried that he might get hurt during the game. And yes, that is absolutely a possibility. But if he is well enough to play, meaning that he has to practice Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you play him. You cannot bench him.
Right.
But as far as tempering expectations, 100%. But that expectation is about whether or not he's going to play because of his injury.
Right.
And I haven't seen anything that makes me feel warm and fuzzy that he is going to play. So right now, you need to act like he's not going to and get your team ready. And if he does, hey, that's sprinkles on ice cream, man.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, last week I had Ingram I started him, and luckily I still got wins in my leagues just from, other guys stepping up. But Mark Ingram was awful last week, and they're bringing in Ty Montgomery for plays, and I'm like, come on, this is your guy. And the one big run he had, it got called back for holding. So Ingram was a huge disappointment last week. But if Kamara doesn't,
I lost you.
You lost me.
Okay, now you're back. But here's Daniel. I'm not gonna answer this question yet, Daniel. And the reason why is because you're actually giving a preview of our final show next month when we do the wrap-up show of the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast, where we're going to have our superlatives and we're going to talk about the best waiver wire, or the worst play, the best draft pick, the worst draft pick. We're going to have our Buzz Superlative Awards, and we would love for you to be part of that, Daniel. We'd love to get everyone's opinion. So we're not going to answer that yet right now, but that's a good question, and we will be bringing that up.
We can answer that one for 2020.
Oh, 2020 is going to say anybody on the San Francisco 49ers.
Eli Mitchell.
Yeah.
That's it. It's over. His segment's done.
But if he shows up, if we invite the special guest to appear,
that's an interesting one. Patterson.
I don't want to talk about it right now.
Don't talk about it.
No, Patterson is in the running, and he has been nominated. He might get a Buzzy this year. We don't know.
When the season's over.
In the season, in our finale show, we'll talk about that, and we'll hand out our Buzzies at that point. But we do appreciate the questions, Daniel, and you listening as well.
Yeah, so that again, this is an interesting week. A lot of people vying. It just in our league alone, right? It looked like the playoffs were kind of set, and then all of a sudden, a couple losses and a couple close games, and a couple people win, and now it looks like I think 9 out of the 10 players in our league have an opportunity at the playoffs. Depending on this week.
I had it wrapped up until Lamar Jackson got soft and Cook got hurt and Debo got hurt, and what are you going to do? But try.
It's amazing how teams week to week can look so good, and that team is like, wow, no one's going to beat these guys all year. And then they have a bad stretch where all the players on their team.
And I'm not complaining or trying to make excuses, because the truth of the matter is you have to be ready for that. And good fantasy players and sometimes it's out of your control.
Sure.
In my case, I didn't have a great bench. Now, whether that is lack of skill or lack of availability,
it could be,
or whatever the case may be, I didn't have the kind of bench that would allow me to step up. Yes, I was able to put Madison in for Cook, and the guy's killing it. That's great. But I was not able to replace the production I was getting from Debo. And that's really hard to do. Thank God Swift went down. It gave me Jamal Williams. But other than that, there wasn't a lot.
I'm always curious to see, and I look over this once in a while, not too often, but how many players are on people's teams that they drafted compared to, picked up in free agency or trade. So, and I know generally is a huge turnover. So I'm going to do a quick synopsis just on our teams. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players on your team that you drafted. 2 of those players are on IR right now, and everybody else is either free agency or trade.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. We'll look at 2020 real quick. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players that he drafted left on his team, and the rest are free agency. Myself, we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
You had a really good draft.
13.
There's no doubt about it.
And 1, 2, 3, 4 that I have on free agency. Yeah.
Anthony wants to know, with Jalen Hurts on bye, would you start Cam Newton or the 9 working fingers Taysom Hill?
Taysom Hill all day long. He could have 3 working fingers, and I start Taysom Hill
because he has a working arm.
I said jelly arm. Where's my dollar?
Here's your dollar, okay? Yes, I was wrong about that. Kenneth, good job, Kenneth. 9-4 heading into his final week at the playoffs started today. He would be the number 2, and I am going to take credit for that. The Fantasy Buzz Podcast, number 1 fan, Kenneth. We appreciate you listening every week. We're sorry that the phones haven't been working. Our Google Voice is not working. But we know you take our advice, and we appreciate that. And we're glad that you're in the playoffs. While I'm talking now, I just wanted to make a shout out. You see my haircut? I know I don't have a lot here, but here, and it's like shaved real nice. But there's a gentleman named Dell who owns, and he's not paying me to do this. I'm just he cuts my hair. Dell's Barbershop in Weston, Florida, and it was like the haircut. It felt like it didn't last long at all because we just talked about fantasy the whole time. Oh, nice. And he's a big player. We were giving each other advice, and it was a lot of fun. So, Dell, if you're listening out there, I know he wrote down the name of the podcast and said he was going to listen. If he's listening, we love having you listen, and thanks for the great haircut. Appreciate it. Maybe
next time I'm down there. Maybe next time I'm down there, we go to Dell's Barbershop and do a live show podcast from there.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be really cool.
Yeah. So Anthony again. I'm going now. Now, who do they play this week? Carolina gets. I don't know who Carolina gets. I should know this because I live in North Carolina. Do you see who they get?
No. Oh. You're talking about who Carolina plays this week?
Yeah.
You stumped me. I don't know off the top of my head.
I know. I'm trying to look quickly through rosters to find somebody.
I don't have anybody that I would start from them.
I know. I'm looking at all the teams and I'm like, who has someone from Carolina? And I can't find anybody who has us as a player.
I'll tell you. It's whoever has Hubbard.
Okay.
So they play the Falcons this week.
Oh yeah. Yes.
So yeah.
Man, and I still got to go with Taysom Hill. I mean, that is a little bit of a tasty matchup, but I still got to go with Hill here. As long as he's playing and he obviously is playing and he doesn't have to sit because of the finger, then definitely him.
Yeah, for sure.
It says Carolina's off. Carolina has a bye this week? No. Is that right?
You know, if you're going to ask me these type of questions, hold on one second. Schedule. Here we go. Okay, week 14, they play against Atlanta. They were off this past week. So on December 12th, which is Sunday,
right,
they play against Atlanta at 1 p.m.
Right.
And talk about a snooze fest.
And Hill gets the Jets.
Yeah. Taysom Hill.
I was wrong. The bye was last week. All right. Thanks, Kenneth.
It's funny, Brad, because I used to, whenever I talk about my quarterback pickups and lineups, yeah. I would say you play the quarterback who plays against Atlanta. And even though in theory, I still believe that, it now has to be conditioned with unless the quarterback is Cam Newton. Start Taysom Hill. I think it's pretty evident at this point.
Man, when they re-signed Newton, you were pretty high on him, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was. I picked him up, and he helped me win that week because
because he ran for 2 touchdowns or something.
Right, which is what he does.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, he's proven not so good since then, but we'll see. I mean, it is Atlanta, so you never know.
Right.
But
okay.
All right.
Well, guys, thank you so much for listening, and Kenneth and Daniel and Anthony, Angelo, and Travis, of course, our Vampire League guy. We really appreciate the comments, listening every week, week in and week out. We truly appreciate it here. We hope that we gave you just a little bit that might have helped you win. If not, it doesn't matter. We're still happy to get your feedback and your advice as well. Obviously, we're not just doing a podcast. We're players too, and love to talk about fantasy with everybody, including you guys. We hope, unfortunately, but I'm not sure if we're doing a Sunday podcast. We'll let you know that on the site. But in the meantime, we will be back next Tuesday night for sure. For myself, the Commish, Brad, any final words?
Enjoy your game on Thursday night. Good luck if you're trying to get into the playoffs.
Thank you. Oh, you weren't talking about me. You're talking about
the Commish and everybody else.
Okay. I got you.
And we'll see you either Sunday or next Tuesday.